Some of you were probably wondering why the cat was still here last episode, and I don't have to explain myself to you.
Because it's Thursday.
Hello, Watchtower Database, and welcome back to The Vanishing Point, the only bi-weekly YouTube show that dissects small chunks of the DCAU timeline to answer questions you probably never thought to ask. Well, most of the time. There was that time recently when we did the horror movies, and then that one time an alternate universe version of James and I got sucked into the white space and did the DC streaming timeline. And hey, speaking of alternate universes, I guess today counts as well. Now, while those two videos that I did mention didn't have any connections to the DCAU, today's topic does. But you know that already if you watched this video. Be sure to check that one out after this if you haven't. For those of you who have watched that video though, or those of you who read the episode title before clicking, you know that today we're talking about the universe that is Justice League, Gods, and Monsters. So now that I'm done plugging like 3 other videos, let's just jump into that. Released in the summer of 2015, Gods and Monsters was a huge deal. To give some historical context, from the beginning of the DC Universe original animated movies line, first announced in 2006, Bruce Timm's involvement was massive as he served as executive producer from 2007's Superman Doomsday up until 2013's Dark Knight Returns Part 2. So when it was announced in 2013 that he was stepping down and handing over the reins to James Tucker, it came as a shock to fans. But almost a year and a half later, towards the tail end of 2014, news stories began to break that Timm had been working on a new, darker take on the Justice League. While initial reporting stated that this project would take the shape of a movie, by September that year, rumblings began to signal there would also be an animated series attached. By the time 2015 rolled around, fans were greeted with not only a movie, but also a set of 3 shorts and 6 tie-in comics written by Bruce Timm himself with the help of J.M. DeMatteis. But remember when I said this was a huge deal just a few seconds ago? Released in the summer of 2015, Gods and Monsters was a huge deal. Yeah, it just didn't end up panning out that way. It was announced that year that there were plans for a second season of 10 episodes, but according to Sam Liu on Twitter, both Warner Home Video and Machinima wanted the project to be in their hands, and as a result, funding was tied up too long and ultimately the hype window was missed. So now all that we have of the second season are these hella cool designs that we may never see in action. Oh, and all the scripts are written too.
We had some ideas. We have an entire, actually we even have the scripts written for a second series of web episodes.
Doesn't it make you so angry? But rather than dwell on what could have been, today we're going to dive into what we actually got and try to see if we can figure out just how well it all lines up. This DC universe begins, as many do, with war between Apocalypse and New Genesis. While we aren't given an exact date in the movie, we are told that they've been at war for about a millennium.
And now, for the first time in a millennium, we can lower our swords.
According to the Wonder Woman origin issue of the tie-in comic, the flashback of her wedding to Orion, the betrayal of the people of Apocalypse, and her arrival to Earth occurred in July of 1962, with the first 7 pages of that issue taking us up to October of that year. So, working backwards, we can assume the New Genesis Apocalypse War began around 962 AD. Not much about this world is fleshed out regarding the millennium between these events, but we do get mention of Project MK Ultra, which in the real world began in 1953. The Wonder Woman origin issue also takes us almost all the way through the 60s, with Becca's boyfriend dying in 1963, a scene set in June of 1964 with her attempting and failing to save 2 African-American men in Mississippi who were murdered by white supremacists that were upset the men were registering people to vote, which, by the way, if you're able to do that and haven't yet, you absolutely should. We'll drop links in the description down below below for resources on how you can get registered. Then we jump to May of 1967 when she meets Guitar Joe and Dr. Psycho. She joins both of them on their hippie commune only to find out that Dr. Psycho has been dabbling in human experimentation. Following this, Becca led a large group away to begin a new commune without Dr. Psycho. But by 1968, he was still experimenting on the few who remained, turning them into an army of man-bat-like creatures to take revenge on her for exposing and splitting up the commune. An altercation that leads us to what seems to be the last of Dr. Psycho, who goes into hiding under the alias of Jackson Alpert. Following these events, we move into Superman's origin issue. Admittedly, this one is a bit more floaty as far as the timeline goes, as it doesn't mention specific years, but we're given some clues here and there regarding his age. From the best of my knowledge, it seems as though Valentina Guerrera, Superman's older sister, is born sometime between the mid-70s to 1980. Krypton explodes and the Guerrera family adopts Hernan at some point between the late 70s to 1983. And sometime between the late 80s to 1991, Hernan plays a prank on his older sister that ends in her becoming paralyzed. As a result of this, Hernan's parents forbid him from ever using his powers again, which causes animosity between them, since this means he has to sit back and watch as his family deals with the racism that comes along with being immigrant laborers. This lasts until sometime during the 2000s when Hernan decides enough is enough and finally takes his revenge against his family's oppressors and then leaves them altogether. Meanwhile, Kirk Langstrom, William Magnus, and Tina are all in college together. During this time, Kirk experiments on himself, which results in him becoming a vampire. We don't know much about when this occurs, but according to Will,
even in college you had those god-awful Beastie Boy posters.
Which places us in 1981 at the earliest. But flip phones also exist, and while they were first invented in 1989, they didn't hit peak popularity until the mid-2000s. From here, the rest of the Superman origin issue plays out, with Hernan taking out drug cartel kingpin Juan Carlos Fuentes by 2008 at the latest. Subsequently, the Batman origin issue takes place in what I once again assume to be the mid-2000s due to the flip phone I mentioned before. During this story, we see Kirk trying to adjust to his vampire life by only drinking the blood of criminals. Among these was Lou Moxon, the head of all organized crime in the city. After killing Moxon, Langstrom attends his funeral in an attempt to better scope out the world of organized crime and preemptively take care of the power vacuum he just created. But while there, he sees Moxon's family in grief and begins to feel guilt over the situation. Kirk goes on to befriend Moxon's son, who helps him take down the crime boss Joe Chill. But during the course of their friendship, Langstrom comes to find out that Jeremy Moxon was just as corrupt as his father and was only using him to take out competition, leading to the end of their friendship. Shortly after both of their origin issues play out, Kirk and Hernan would meet each other 10 years before the events of the film.
Do you realize it's been 10 years since I met you?
For now, we're just going to say this is sometime between 2007 and 2010. But trust me, it'll make sense why later on. Now that we've gotten through all the single issue origin stories, this brings us around to the film's 3-issue prequel comic, which sees the return of Dr. Psycho and the official formation of the Justice League. I won't spoil all the details here for you, but this is the first time that Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman meet Steve Trevor and President Waller, which places us before the Gods and Monsters Chronicles short since they're already familiar there. In the first issue, Jackson Alpert tells us his life work has taken over 40 years, a point later reiterated by Batman, placing us between 2008 to 2016, up to 49 years after we first met him as Dr. Psycho. Becca states later on that the two met nearly 50 years ago, which closes the gap to 2012 to 2016. And at one point, Kirk explains that Dr. Psycho's death in 1968 was over 45 years ago, which closes our gap even further to sometime between 2014 to 2016. Also of note, since Waller is already president in this story, that means at most there could be up to 8 years between this comic and the film. Keeping that in mind, let's move to the Chronicles shorts really quick. Given that these are shorts, there's not much we can get from them as far as timeline info goes. Bomb features Superman working with President Waller, and Big features Wonder Woman working with Steve Trevor. So, as I've already stated, they seem to occur between the comic and the movie. Twisted features absolutely no timeline clues whatsoever, but with the other two fitting where they do, it's safe to assume that this one follows suit. Looking a bit deeper deeper into Big, however, there's a crucial line of dialogue that helps narrow things down even more.
On what dubious mission has Waller sent you this time? We were going to demonstrate it tomorrow at her inauguration.
Since this means Waller has only had one term as president so far, this would then place the film after her second inauguration, which would take place in 2017 following the 2016 election. And theoretically, the film could take place anytime between then and when she leaves office in January of 2021. With all of this pinned down now, for any of you who want to marathon this criminally short world, my suggested order is the Wonder Woman origin issue, followed by the Superman one, then the Batman issue. You can finish off your reading material with the 3-issue prequel comic, hop on over from there to the Gods and Monsters Chronicles, and then on to the movie itself. But I hear you asking, where can I watch the Chronicles episodes? And that's a great question. After all, Machinima was shut down earlier this year, and given that their YouTube channel was the only official outlet to watch them, it's pretty difficult to come by them these days. Luckily for you, World's Finest has all 3 episodes currently available on their website, so we'll leave a link to that in the description down below. But this brings us around to the question of the day, which is, what do we do with you? Sorry, I saw that panel while writing the script and had to use it. The actual question of the day is, what are your thoughts on the cancellation of Gods and Monsters Chronicles Season 2? Personally, I would love to see more of this world, and given that scripts and designs seem to be done, it would be awesome if after all these years, they finally decided to give it a green light. But that's just me though. Maybe you didn't like this world and you're only watching this video to help us out with the ad revenue. I don't know your life, but as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave your answers down under in the Australia box. Of course, before I go, I want to give a shout out to all of these lovely people who have helped support us on Patreon this month. If you don't see your name on there and you would like for it to be slapped on for the next time, you can go to patreon.com/DCAU Watchtower and we'll get it on there for as low as $1. But while you're there, be sure to check out all the other perks because there's lots of cool stuff going on. Either way, whether you donate $1 or $1 billion, we really appreciate it. Give us $1 billion if you can. Jeff Bezos, give me your f***ing money. All that being said, I've been Matty Washburn. This has been The Vanishing Point, and we'll continue to stay those things so long as you continue to stay you. I love you bunches, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Now, go watch more of our videos and share them on all your favorite social media sites like Reddit and Facebook and all of that. If you don't, I'll kidnap your dad and add him to my daddy collection.